Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today, super excited. I am speaking with Suzanne, and Suzanne Stevens is somebody pretty inspiring, I would say, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. She's an author, an international speaker, a social entrepreneur, and an adventure traveler. Suzanne, it's so good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me, Tamara.
Yeah, so, the world feels very fragile right now. It feels, I guess I should say it's felt fragile for a long time, but more so now than ever before. You have done some pretty amazing things in your time, and I know you're not done yet. You have, meaningful work that you've been doing. You've given it all up. You've traveled. You've done all kinds of things. So let's start with the You, Me, We movement. I need to get that straight in proper order. Tell me about You, Me, We.
Yeah, and you're right about the proper order too, because the order is actually so important. So the movement is really based on an ethos of people contributing to society and having a positive social impact, be it through volunteerism, be it through politics, be it through social enterprise. And I really encourage organizations to look at how to bake into their business, how to uplift marginalized or underserved communities. So for example, as I said, it's important to recognize that you comes first. And it's really being conscientious of how to help and not hurt, how to provide opportunity, not create dependency.
Okay. Got it. So let's back it up for a second here. So now that I know what the movement is, the You, Me, We movement, let's backtrack and bring it back to when I don't want to say you really packed it all up, didn't you? You had a conversation with your husband about not being fulfilled, and you decided that you wanted to pack it all up and leave. So walk us through that.
Well, pretty much that was on my 42nd birthday, which is not, a time where people often focus on their careers and try to accelerate. And I had a successful consultancy where I was training on 5 continents and influential communications and 6 employees. However, I wasn't feeling meaning. It wasn't, even though I was teaching people how to communicate, it just wasn't enough for me. And so there I was crying the day after my 42nd birthday on the floor and said to my husband, this is not enough. This is not enough. So through my influential communications, I convinced him to pack up and sell everything we owned. And it did take a while because he was a leader in his own right. So we had to wait, and the economy fell out in 2008 and 9, as you may recall. And I just went, I'm making money, but it's just not enough. So we sold our loft. Thank goodness the gentleman that bought it bought everything in it. And we took our backpacks and headed to Africa and traveled through 17 African countries and 19 countries total, but 17 African countries.
That's so fascinating because that's such a scary thing to do for anybody, right? Now, listen, I have 3 kids, so obviously I can't pack it up and move to another country. I guess I could, but it seems exhausting. I can barely pack my kids up and take them, for a hike for the day. It's a lot of energy and work. So it really is, so at what point when did we, okay, I really need to get this straight. When did that happen? So you went to Africa, you had this project, which sounds incredible. I mean, to connect people, right? You were connecting women with other women in the countries that you were in. So how did that then evolve into your next movement?
So that's a really, really great question, because You Me We started as a blog of my husband and I just posting our adventures. And I mean, wasn't many blogs, but that's what I came up with that name for us. And ironically, you is blue because that's his favorite color. Me is red because that was mine at the time. And if you put those together, it makes purple. It was it was a square. It was a square, and now we've made it round. And the reason is because in interviewing all of the 70 African pioneering women we interviewed, the one thing they had in common, there's several things, but the one thing they had in common, and the only question I didn't ask, was why they were doing this.
I often wonder, like, you know, when we look around the world and we see what's happening, there's a lot of work to be done in this country. We have a lot of work to do in this country. And I feel like sometimes we, sometimes Canadians are quick to look elsewhere in the world and be critical, but we have to understand that our work here at home, we can't get to reconciliation, if you will, until we, even get to the truth, So how do companies in Canada start to focus on, what's happening in our own backyard and finding that, applying it to this movement that you're talking about, where we can support the work that still needs to be done here.
What you need to do is look at your organization, look at your values, what will complement what your organization does, and what will you get buy-in from your employees. Now, depending on how big your company is, like you look at a TELUS, you do so many different things at TELUS, and they're all amazing things. But one of your big projects right now is one I love, is about social impact and empowering businesses to people that lead social impact and funding them. So you need to look at what's a complement to your organization, but you also need to look at what is a complement to the values of the organization and also to the individuals within the organization. And if you can't get that all aligned, again, the larger your organization, the harder it is to get that all aligned, is create smaller teams to contribute to certain areas that they personally connect to. And if you do that, and I call this creating a conscious contribution circle, so that you have these small groups of people that are connected to an initiative so that they find meaning at work. And with millennials and Z generation, particularly millennials, going in and out of jobs, they're not finding a connection to that work. And if you want to keep them, they need to find a connection to that work. They need to feel your values. They need to align with your mission. And it's beyond the work and it's beyond the money. The money motivator is taking a back seat for a lot of the younger generation than me anyway.
Okay. So I want to talk more about this compassion connection. Before we do that, one of our ways of thanking our guests for taking the time to be on the podcast is we ask them to choose a registered Canadian charity. You chose My Friend's House, which is a shelter for women and children, and we will be giving them $500 on your behalf to support them. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about why you chose that organization.
Yes, thank you for the question, and thank you for the donation as well. They're very excited about that. The reason I picked them is because violence against women has risen during the pandemic, and it's gone through the roof. And a lot of women during lockdown didn't have a place to go. I believe, and through talking to several shelters, because I did do some due diligence, found that not only like people are trying to get in, but as soon as the lockdown, which now across Canada is mostly, there is no lockdown at this point, to my understanding, in all the provinces, women are trying to get out of their situations and they need our support. Women have suffered in every aspect of this pandemic. And one of the biggest things is more violence amongst Indigenous women. And it's got to stop. It has to stop. And I'm a big fan of education. And my friend's house also educates women on how to not get back into these situations. So that's a big piece for me as well, is to make sure that we get people out of these situations and educate them in a way to empower them not to get back into that situation.
You mentioned money. And so like a lot of people, that's their way of giving back, right? Like we all have different, I feel like we all have different strengths. And, you know, I'm not one of those people that can write a big check for, you know, a fundraiser, but I can volunteer my time and I can help out with other things where my strengths are, right? Whether that be, you know, in a little bit of PR help or helping people get, you know, things for silent auctions and stuff like that. We all have our strengths of things that we do. What do you think? I mean, when it comes to employees, I was very interested in what you said there, and you know, bringing the next generation into this movement of giving back or supporting others. How do you do that as a company? You know, a mid-sized company or a small-sized company. What if what you want to help doesn't align with what your employees want to help? Like I'm trying to make that connection. How does that work?
Now, I have one woman I interviewed. What she does is literally, if it's a product, 2 cents off every product goes to an initiative. Part of her product goes to the food banks. It's a healthy product where food banks often don't get healthy products. So she just donates the product. It's cost her less to do that way, which is a great way to do it. One of the things I do as a solopreneur, again, I mentioned part of my book goes to education, but another piece is every time someone posts on my You Me We movement campaign, celebrate somebody who's contributed to society, I donate $1 to a woman in business or education, and they can tell me where they want it donated. And then every month, I donate to another woman that money. So it's not like it's a big amount of money, but it also gets traction of people wanting to contribute and celebrate, which is a key value of mine as well, to celebrate people contributing. So find out what are those inner strengths and evaluate them and which ones you can contribute to. And then what are you passionate about is really important as well, and your values. So what do you value? And does the organization you want to contribute to, be it work for or volunteer for, do those values align with yours? And how do they treat volunteers? And know your parameters on how that works. So you got to put barriers up. So be empathy, compassion, love and enjoy, your inner strengths, environment, values, and empower. Believe to your purpose.
I'm curious what you think about, like, do you think that nowadays we're relying too much on, you know, other people's advocacy and fundraising? And should we be holding, you know, our different levels of government to a higher standard for, you know, really putting people's needs in this country and worldwide? You know, like, I just feel like we're in a very different time right now.
I do think we need to be more we focus, without a doubt. The way I think we should do it, however, is not necessarily rely on the government and not necessarily rely on fundraising. I think we need to build our businesses to contribute. And therefore, people will come. I mean, it's proven, the research has proven people will come. And if more people built their business with a social issue attached to it by filling a social gap, offering jobs. I just interviewed a fabulous woman from Winnipeg who created a job for women in transition. She's making money by helping women in transition make jewelry. And it's authentic jewelry from all different cultures, but they're all from around Winnipeg. And she's making a living and feeding her children. So there's ways of doing things that we just need to start being more innovative and realize that we can't count on anyone to solve the problems. We have to take the responsibility to do that and start looking to our businesses to do that.
Well, Suzanne, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Your website is youmewe.ca. That's where people can find your book, Make Your Contribution Count. And you can also follow Suzanne on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or all three, at You, Me, We Movement. Suzanne, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tamara. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.